Hi, I'm Miss Mercer, Decatur Township District Reading Specialist, and I will be teaching your Sunday Level 6 Day 1 lesson today. The goal here for today and every day when we start the lesson is to have your child on the following slides read each sound aloud and rapidly. If your student makes an error while repeating the sounds, just say, "Let's trace." Then say, "This is the letter C," which says k, and then show the keyword slide that goes with that sound. And then have them trace 3 times. C, k, C, k, C, k. Okay. Feel free to also pause the video if your child needs more time for each sound. I'm going to go through quickly. Make sure your student says R, not for R. Okay, now I'm going to dictate the following sounds one by one. This is the paper that we would use at school, just so you're familiar with the format. Obviously, you can use whatever you have. If you don't have any paper, you can use notes on your iPad. If your teacher uses Canvas, you could also write on a PDF in Canvas. So the student is going to repeat the sound after I say it, and then they're going to say it and write it at the same time. Ah. They'll repeat the sound, and then they'll repeat the sound and write it. They'll do that for all of the following sounds. And they would write those in this section right here. X, A, B, S, D, I. Remember, you could always pause the video at any time to give the learner more time. Again, if you've seen some prior videos, you'll know this, but because I don't know who's starting where, I'm going to repeat it. If your student makes a mistake, say they write, say I see a C, or I see K, I wanted B. What letter makes the B sound? Try to prompt them for the correction. Okay, and hopefully they would say E. Okay, say, if you have this, cross it out and then write this. We don't want them to erase. And then write it 2 more times B says B. B says B. To make it permanent. Okay. Okay, now the student will read one column of words from the next page. Make sure they place their fingers underneath the word. If they make an error, once again, say let's trace. Make sure they're looking at the word, and then they're going to trace each letter while saying the sound and then blend. So if they miss tan, they'll be looking at the slide and they'll go t, ah, tan, and they will do that 3 times using both of these fingers. Okay, so the student can pick one of these columns to read. If you feel like your child needs to repeat the lesson, repetition really solidifies it in the brain. Have them pick one column one day, then you can redo the video and do a different column the next day. You can do that up to 3, 4, 5 times. So pause the video and pick a column for your student to read. Okay. Now that you're done with that portion, this is another example of touch spelling. If you've seen previous videos, you've seen this before, but I'm going to repeat anyway, just in case. So if you are a righty, this is what you would be writing with, but you would be touch spelling with this hand, and you would start with your pinky to follow the left to right of our language. So if you were said tan, again, t, ah, and then they would go t, ah, Now, if you are a lefty, you'd be writing with this hand, and then you'd be touch spelling right here, and you would do t, ah, That way you can touch spell and write at the same time. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to the spell words section. We've already done the spell sounds, so your student would write, if they had their student notebook, would be writing in this section. I'm going to read some words to them. The learner will repeat the word. They will touch spell the word, and then they will say each sound out loud while writing the word. And this helps get it into the brain and helps with automaticity, them being able to automatically say the word. Okay, so the first word is fox. They would say fox. They would touch spell fox. Fox. Then they would touch spell and write at the same time. Ox. Okay. So they would do that for all of the following words. Feel free to pause the video after each word so that your student has time to do this, because they need to be writing it on the paper as well. Had. Pit. Hop. This is the sight word a. 6. Ran. Dim. Rob. And then the sight word the. Okay. Give your student enough time to write all of these words. Now we're going to check these words. Okay, so on this, check your words. If you made an error, cross it out. Don't erase it, just cross it out. Then write it 3 more times. You might be able to see a pattern in what they are making errors on, and that might help the teacher know how to guide their instruction in the future. So check for these words. If you do not have what is on the screen, cross it out and write it correctly 3 times while saying the sound. If it is the sight word, write it again 3 times while saying the letter. Had. Pit. Feel free to pause while they check. Hop, A, the sight word. 6, ran, dim, rob, the sight word, the. Okay. So now we're on the spell words, phrases, and sentences section. Okay. The learner will repeat the sentence as I say it, or after I say it as a whole sentence. Then they were going to tap one word per finger, and then they're going to write it. Okay. So the learner will repeat the sentence after me and tap one word per finger. After they write each sentence, have them check for capitalization and punctuation. Okay. So the first sentence, and now we have an actual sentence, so they do need to look for capitalization and punctuation. Bob got the job. The student would touch spell. Bob got, well, wouldn't touch spell, would use their hands for this part. Bob got the job. So one finger per word. Okay, have them say it as a complete sentence. Do not break it up. Try to get them to repeat it as a complete sentence when they're finished. Okay, so check for capitalization and punctuation after you've written that word. Pause the video if you need more time to write. Okay, the next sentence, you will repeat after me after I say it. The fox hid. The fox hid. Okay. Pause the video to give yourself enough time to write the sentence. Please make sure that you check for capitalization and the correct ending marks. Okay, now we're going to check your sentences. Oh, I just wanted to state that in class, that's where that portion would be written. Okay, so check your sentences. If you made an error, cross it out. Don't erase it and write it correctly. With the sentences, depending on the amount of room that you have, if you miss this word, just cross it out and write it above it. If you forgot an ending mark or capitalization, just cross it out and write it above it. Okay? Pause the video if you need to check that. Okay, now we're going to introduce a new sight word, and this is different. They'll look at the sight word card, they'll say it aloud, and I'll ask you to repeat it. The learner will trace the letter on a table, or they can even trace it on the computer screen or the iPad screen. They will repeat the word before and after tracing, but instead of saying the letter sounds, they will say the letter names. Okay? 2. And they could trace on a board, or they can trace on the screen. But instead of saying the sounds, they'll say T-O says 2 3 times. T-O says 2. It's better to trace on a rougher surface. If you have one instead of a smooth screen, it helps give more input. So T-O says 2. Do that 3 times. Okay. Now I want you to write right here under the new material section 2. Do that 3 times. If you have a red pen or a red marker or a red crayon, that would be great. If not, just use what you have and write T-O says 2. Have the student say that while they write 3 times on the first line. Pause the video to give your child or student more time. Okay, the next one is do. D-O says do. So you're going to trace on a surface. If you have sand, that'd be great, but I know most people don't have sand. So D-O says do. D-O says do. D-O says do. 3 times. Make sure if they could look at the screen while they do that so that they get a visual input as well. Okay, so now I want them to write right here, D-O says do. D-O says do. D-O says do. Okay, and then we have another sight word, is. Okay, same routine. I-S says is. I-S says is. I-S says is. 3 times. And then they'll write that on the bottom final line. I-S says is. I-S says is. I-S says is. Okay, then the final portion of our lesson is the read aloud. You can pause the video to give your child enough time to read all of the sentences in the read aloud section.